Welcome to the Life of the Messiah through the Gospel of John. Now here's Rabbi Pastor LaRue.
Shalom and welcome back to our course, week 4, course 4, and this is Life of the Messiah through the Gospel of John. Okay, so today we are at week 4, and we're going to be discussing the miracles of the Messiah in Yohanan, or that is John's Gospel. And we're going to be covering the miracles throughout the Gospel of John, dealing with John chapter 2, verse 1 through 11. We'll be covering John 4, 43 through 54. We'll also be covering John 5, 1 through 24, and then John 6, 1 through 14, and then John 6, 15 to 21, and then John chapter 9 and John chapter 10. And then finally, we'll end our last miracle throughout John's Gospel in John 11, 1 through 57. Okay, so first of all, in your outline, today, if you want to get your extra handouts and ongoing lessons, you can go onto our website, and that's going to be found at messianicsprings.org. And if you'll go into the right upper corner in our homepage, just click the link on study materials, and there you'll find all the necessary handouts for this week's lesson and oncoming lessons. Okay, that being said, let's talk about today in our summary. In your outline, we are at summary on the Messiah's 7 signs and miracles here. Okay, so throughout Jesus' ministry, he did a variety of miracles, but what really was and is the reason that Yeshua created all these miracles and did these signs and wonders? Well, let's find out. Again, starting on summary on the Messiah's 7 signs and miracles in your outline. Now, throughout the Gospel of Yohanan or John, we come and we see that John will testify and will use number 7 concerning the signs and miracles of Yeshua. He'll also use the number 7 again when we get to the 7 I Ams of the Messiah. But now, is there a specific reason, okay? Is there a specific reason as to why John introduces us to the number 7 here in his gospel? What is it, or what was it, and was it because John was superstitious? Was it because he thinks 7 was a lucky number here? Or was he making a valid point with it to enlighten his readers that 7 is a very important biblical concept concerning the Messiah here? And we have a handout now for you. And this handout in your outline is called Signification of the Biblical Number 7. If you'll check that out, you'll find a lot of interesting and in-depth information concerning the background on what 7 really actually means and why we use it. Why was it in the Bible? I'd really encourage you to go on over there and take a look at that. Okay, so getting back to the number 7 here. However, the number 7 is a number in the Bible, okay, that dates all the way back to what? Well, all the way back to creation. As we know from the Torah and in the Old Testament, in the Torah in Bereshit, we find in Genesis 2, 2 and 3, that on the 7th day here, God had finished or had completed all his work concerning what? Well, concerning creation. He did not need then to just rest because he physically got tired, okay? He did not then need to rest because he was physically tired here. God doesn't get tired. God is a spirit. But the meaning is that God had stopped and had ended everything concerning creation. There was no further need for the work of creation, as it was what? Well, as it was made perfect and it was made complete. It was a perfect and complete work made by God. And here is where the concept comes from and the meaning of 7, and this is how it was developed here. And so we too learn from the very beginning, Bereshit, from the very beginning, that the biblical concept for the number 7 means a what? Well, it means a work of perfection, or that is a work of completion. And now, if you were Jewish back in first century Israel, and had read or had heard of this event being read every year in your synagogue, you too would have known or would have understood that God had completed and had perfected everything that he made within 7 days, making the number 7 once again significant because it relates to God's perfection and completion of his work. Now, this same concept about the meaning of the work of completion and perfection is also understood here by John in his gospel, as John now uses it in his gospel to explain to us that God had completed and had revealed and had perfected all his work through who? Through Yeshua the Messiah here. Now, God had perfected and had completed all his work of signs and miracles through our Messiah, and this is the reason as to why we see the continuous number 7 being used in John's Gospel. Did you get all that? Okay, so as to state to the reader here, God has perfected, okay? God has perfected and has completed all his work through Yeshua. Everything that God did through his Son was what? It was completed. It was perfect. It was perfected through the Messiah. And that's what we are to learn here. Okay, now moving along in your outline, we are at reasons for the signs, miracles, and healings of Yeshua Jesus. Now that we've understood why John used the number 7 in his gospel, let us go to the reasons as to why the miracles themselves here were made by our Messiahs. We really want to know that today. So now, unfortunately, guys, today as many people have seemed to think that Yeshua, or that is Jesus, created miracles and he healed people so they could make ministries out of the healing gift here. And sadly, I'll say this, and sadly, this is such an abused and misled work of man's ignorance, greed, and error in not clearly understanding here why Yeshua showed signs, miracles, and healed people. Why did he do it? Did he do it to get popular? No. Did he do it to get money? No. What is the reason Yeshua did it versus what some reasons of people that take healing gifts today and make ministries out of? They have wrong motives. They have wrong ideas about what Jesus really did here. So let's go ahead and find out. Now, it is a personal belief here, and this is my belief here, that Yeshua still can heal and very much does still heal today. And this continues to make, and he continues to make miracles all on his own and through prayer. So I truly believe God still makes miracles through the Messiah, and it is for a special reason, and I'll share that with you as we get on through this lesson. But sticking to the scriptural teaching, guys, we need to review, or we need to reveal here a couple of reasons as to why Yeshua showed signs and miracles and did healings. And let's move into your outline starting with point A. Let's talk about why he did these things. Yeshua made signs, miracles, and healings to do what? Well, number A in your outline. Number 1A, to validate his messiahship here, or to show that he was and is the Messiah. Point B here in your outline. Second thing was to fulfill the prophetic messianic claims. This is why he created these miracles and signs and wonders, to fulfill the prophetic messianic claims here. As prophecy, it said that the Messiah would fulfill prophecy as he healed, showed signs, and made miracles here. Okay, moving on to point C in your outline. What's the other reason that Yeshua did these things? Well, he did them to glorify the Father. Everything that Yeshua or Jesus did was to do what? Well, it was to glorify our Heavenly Father. Now, moving on to point D is to encourage and to provoke faith from the people. Yeshua created miracles and did signs and wonders so he could do what? Well, that he would provoke his own people to faith and that they would put trust in him here. So it is to encourage and provoke faith from the people. Now he did this again so the people would do what? Well, so that the people would trust and that they would develop a belief here in who? In him. And that God had sent him. Okay? Okay, now moving on to our last point here. Reasons for the signs and miracles and healings of the Messiah. Point E. To cause the people to accept and put their full trust in that Yeshua Jesus was the chosen Messiah of Israel. Now, Yeshua Jesus did all these signs, healings, and miracles so the people would know again that Yeshua was and is what? Well, he is the chosen, promised Messiah of Yisrael or Israel here. Okay, now, John tells us that this is one of the very first out of 7 miracles that Yeshua will perform here. Now, we go into John 2, chapter 2, verses 1 through 11 in your outlines, and this is what it tells us. Verse 1. And on the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Yeshua was there. Verse 2. And Yeshua also was invited, and his disciples to the wedding. Verse 3. And when the wine gave out, the mother of Yeshua said to him, They have no wine. Verse 4. And Yeshua Jesus said to her, Woman, what do I have to do with you? My hour has not come yet. Verse 5. His mother said to the servants, Whatever he says to you, do it. Verse 6. Now there were 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 or 30 gallons each. Verse 7. Yeshua or Jesus said to them, Fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. Verse 8. And he said to them, Draw some out now and take it to the head waiter. And they took it to him. Verse 9. And when the head waiter tasted the water which had become wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the head waiter called the bridegroom. Verse 10. And said to him, Every man serves good wine first, and when men have drunk freely, then that which is poor, you have kept the good wine until now. Verse 11. This beginning of his signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now, here we find in a place called, in Hebrew, is Capernaum, which is a small town called Cana in the Galilee area, along with 5 of his new disciples here. Now, they were there because they were invited by who? Well, by Mary, the mother of Yeshua, as we see from verses 1 and 2. But as soon as Yeshua shows up, all of a sudden the party does what? Well, the party runs out of wine here. Now, in first century Jewish culture of that time, the weddings usually last a good several days here. And for them to run out of wine right from the start shows that Yeshua, or that is Jesus, perhaps came when most of the wine had already been consumed here, okay? So most likely they could have arrived sometime much later than at the beginning of the wedding feast, as no one of that time who gave a wedding feast would not have been unprepared in this area, as wine played a huge part of the Jewish wedding feast here. But nevertheless, in verse 3, Mary looks to Yeshua to intervene. But now in verses 4, Yeshua answered and responded to her here, and it sounds a little bit condescending or even a little disrespectful, as Yeshua said, Woman, okay, woman, what have I to do with you? My hour has not come yet. Almost sounds a little bit disrespectful there. Now this almost again was like he was trying to distance himself by not even calling or addressing her as mother, or that in the Hebrew is ima, mother, or a term that we also call mama, hey mom, or mother here. He didn't even address her as that. He calls her woman, and according to some scholars, that term woman was more like saying madam or miss. But here, Yeshua just totally dismisses the whole mother thing here, and he just says, madam or miss. He totally is not being disrespectful here either. But he just addresses her as woman. But was Yeshua actually being disrespectful here? As we know from the Torah, or the Hebrew Scriptures, it says in Shemot, that is Exodus 20 verse 12, it says to honor your father and mother. But what Jesus was saying to his mother here was that he was not of the age of obligation to assist her, as he was now a Jewish independent adult living on his own. And the only commitment that most Jewish men of his age had to their parents after adulthood was to honor and care for them when they were of senior or elder age, which Mary was not at the time. So here we find Yeshua, Jesus, was not parentally obligated to get involved here. But a better translation and understanding of what Yeshua may have said was something like, woman, what does any of this have to do with me? Now, the second reason he hesitated to aid his mother here was that he did not want to reveal himself by this miracle just yet. Now, this is why he said, my hour has not come yet. He did not say this as meaning to his time of the coming crucifixion. He said this pointing to the situation at hand here. In other words, it wasn't his time to reveal who he was as the Messiah until when? Well, until he got to Jerusalem. And there he would begin revealing his messiahship by signs, miracles, and wonders here. Now, as we see from verse 5, Yeshua did not reply with a resounding, okay, Mom, no problem here. But we see that Mary instructs the servants to do whatever Yeshua will tell them to do, as she knew and had faith and trust in her Son, that he would help her out, even though he gave no further response to her request here, but did end up making the miracle of turning water into wine, as we see this happen in verses 6 and 8. So nevertheless, it wasn't quite the time for the Messiah to reveal himself yet. He was going to do this when he got to Jerusalem, but he could not deny the request of his mother. And as we all know, when Mom asks us to do something, pretty much we kind of cave in. And this was a situation with our Lord. He just gave in, and he did it anyway. Okay, now that the water that Yeshua here, let's talk about the water used here. The water that Yeshua used here was used for sacred purposes here, which in Hebrew is called the tahara, okay? And tahara means purification. And this water was poured into a pool like a stone tub and was used every time a person encountered some kind of uncleanliness, okay? Or when they needed to wash before meals, they would purify themselves with this water. They would also need to submerge, or they would do a mikvah. They would mikvah themselves in this ritual bath water for what? Well, for spiritual cleansing here. Now, we've got another handout for you here today, and it is called Jewish Custom of Purification, and really great details there about understanding what Jewish people did to remain spiritually clean by being washing themselves in the water baths. I would definitely encourage you to check that out. Okay, now here, okay, so here it is interesting that this is the water which was used to make wine. The water that made them spiritually clean here was used to bring them joy, and the one who would do both here was Yeshua, the Messiah, as wine is looked upon as a symbol of the blood of the Messiah Jesus. Now, Jesus himself symbolically associated wine and had transformed its meaning with what? Well, with his blood. As it says this, where from Matthew 26, 27, and 29. And this is what it says in your outline, starting with verse 27. It said, "And when he had taken a cup and given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink from it, all of you.' Verse 28, 'For this is my blood of the covenant, which is being poured out for many for forgiveness of sin.' Verse 29, 'But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it with you new in my Father's kingdom.'" Now, wine, okay, wine, which is now blood here, okay, is the symbol which represents the establishing of the Brit Hadashah, or that is the new covenant here. Now, I'm sure most of those at the wedding feast didn't quite realize this just yet, but many would after Yeshua would shed his blood and become the sacrifice for our sins. They would understand that meaning of the wine turned into blood here. It's not ritual water of purification that will remove or even take away our sins or even purify us, but it is the blood here, okay? It is the blood of Yeshua which makes us spiritually clean, pure, and justified before who? Well, before God. Now, I think John's retelling of this first miracle of Yeshua here really has a lot to say in regards to who it really is that makes men clean with God. Was it the ritual purification, or was it the work of the Messiah? Well, I think you got it right. That's the work of the Messiah. So now, what was the results? Okay, let's talk about the results of this miracle here. What was the results for the first miracle here? Well, getting into your outline, we are at 2 results for this miracle. Beginning with number 1. What was the result here? Well, Jesus manifested his glory here because it showed his power to create as God the Father created the heaven and the earth, showing us what? Well, showing us co-deity. He and the Father are one. They are no different. Okay, number 2. What's another reason for the miracle here? Well, the disciples believed on him. What they had believed earlier about Yeshua had now been confirmed. When the disciples saw this miracle, they ultimately put their trust and faith, believing this was God's Messiah. So the result here is that now they had 100% faith and trust that Yeshua is the promised Messiah of Israel, as verse 11 told us. When they saw the miracle, what did they do? They finally had enough trust and faith and belief that what? Well, that he is the Messiah of Israel. Okay, so this is the reason why this miracle was done in Canaan. We are at miracle number 2 here, and this is where Yeshua will heal a royal official's son. And we are going to read this out of John 4:43 to 54. And so this is the second miracle that Yeshua will create. And again, we find this where? We find this in Yohanan. We find this in John 4:43 through 54. And this is what it says, starting with verse 43. "And after 2 days, he went forth from there into Galilee." Verse 44. "For Yeshua, or Jesus himself, testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country." Verse 45. "So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things that he did in Jerusalem at the feast. For they themselves also went to the feast." Verse 46. "He came there again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water to wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son was sick at Capernaum." Verse 47. "When he heard that Yeshua had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and was requesting him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death" here. Verse 48. "Yeshua therefore said to him, Unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe." Verse 49. The royal official said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. Verse 50. Yeshua said to him, Go your way, your son lives. The man believed the word that Yeshua spoke to him, and he started off. Verse 51. And as he was now going down, his slaves met him, saying that his son was living. Verse 52. So he inquired of them the hour when he began to get better. They said, therefore, to him, yesterday at the 7th hour. The fever left him. Verse 53. So the father here knew that it was at that hour in which Yeshua said to him, Your son lives, and he himself believed, and his whole household. Verse 54. This is again a second sign that Yeshua performed when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. So here we find a man comes to Yeshua. His son is sick. He's on the brink of death here. He begs the Messiah to come to him, but the Messiah doesn't get up and rush and go to his side to heal the boy. Instead, he says what? Well, he says, Your son lives. Go your way. So in this account, sometime toward the end of April here, and after the time of Passover in Jerusalem, Yeshua had left the area of Samaria, in which many Samaritans believed upon him as Messiah, and so now he begins his travel back to the Galilee of Cana here. As we see from verses 43 and 46, this is what it tells us. But in verse 44, Yeshua made this statement that a prophet, that is a Nabi, a prophet has no honor in his own country. Now this statement is also found in the Gospel of Matthew 13:57, Mark 6:4, Luke 4:24. We see this account, which the statement itself is a reference and Hebraic expression for rejection and disrespect. Okay, did you catch that? This statement that says a prophet has no honor in his own country is a Hebraic expression for rejection and disrespect. As we also know from the Hebrew Scriptures or the Old Testament that many other prophets too suffered times of rejection and disrespect by their own people in their own country. We learn that when we read the Old Testament. And Yeshua says this because he too knew that he was not going to be received well in Galilee, or his own town in Yerushalayim, or Jerusalem here. It wasn't going to be a great time of joy here for our Messiah, but it would be a time of what? Well, it was going to be a time of disappointment and grief here. But nevertheless, okay, Yeshua goes back to Galilee, even though he knows already what the outcome is going to be when he gets there. He also knew that it was more beneficial for him when he visited other places outside those areas of Jerusalem to perform his miracles and signs, that people there would receive and would believe in him there. You see, there were places in Yeshua's ministry that he went to, and he knew that he was going to be rejected. He knew he wasn't going to be received. He knew he was going to be disrespected, and it wasn't going to go well for him there. But nevertheless, he needed to go forth and preach the message. He needed to go forth and do these signs so that what? Well, that people would make decisions to put faith and trust in him. But now, getting into verses 46 and 47, Yeshua here is in the Galilee, and a royal official from Capernaum hears he's there, and so he goes to Yeshua to do what? Well, he went there to plead for his son's near-death health condition here again. So in verses 48 and 50, Yeshua hears this man's request, and scholars say that this man may have been a fellow Jew who was Romanized, serving as one of Herod's officials here. But Yeshua's answer to the official was, what? Well, he said, unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe. Now, most Jewish people who knew their own history and had heard the Torah from Sabbath to Sabbath knew, okay, Jewish people, Hebrews of the day, they knew that they were not to believe or have faith in God simply based on signs and miracles. A great parallel example on this statement of Yeshua is found where? Well, we find it in the Torah. We find this in Bar Midbar, that is Numbers 14:11, and this is what it says starting with verse 11. And the Lord said to Moshe, the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people spurn me? How long will they not believe in me despite all the signs which I have performed in their midst? Verse 12, I will smite them with pestilence and dispossess them, and I will make you into a nation greater, mightier than they. Now here we see that God desires his people to place and have faith in him and his word alone, not just in signs and miracles here. Having faith and gaining belief just because of a sign or miracles is not considered by God as having a true faith or belief here. And so what we learn here from Yeshua's statement to the official was that he did not need to be present in order to create a miracle here. He could just simply speak and command his word to go forth, and it would be done. As we see again an example found within the Hebrew scriptures here throughout the prophets, the book of the prophets. Here we find Yeshayahu, Isaiah here, Isaiah 55, 10 and 11, which says this in your outline, verse 10 here. It says, for as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return without watering the earth and making it produce and sprout and providing seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Verse 11, so will my word be which goes out of my mouth. It will not return to me empty, without accomplishing what I desire and without succeeding in the purpose for which I send it. And so this was Yeshua's point with the official. To place trust and faith in what? Well, to trust and faith, have faith in his word alone here. He did not need to be present. He did not need to go to his son to perform this miracle. Yeshua's word is his authority. And even as God's word was spoken forth and created the earth in 7 days, through the power and authority of his word, it was accomplished. And so this was also a great parallel to Yeshua showing and operating as who? Well, as co-deity. To create by his word, as we know in the Torah, that God had also created the world in 7 days. Now in verses 51 and 54, John points out here that the official realizes that on the 7th hour, okay, showing again this was a perfect and completed work on the 7th hour in which the man spoke to Yeshua, was the very same time that the man's son was what? Well, the man's son was healed. The work was perfected. It was done the moment Yeshua spoke it. Now John, again, making the number 7 here, a point to a completed thing done by the Messiah. And so that's what we're supposed to understand here by the 7th hour. This is a completed miracle that Yeshua had done. Now, as the 7th hour is not, again, a coincidence here, okay, we don't find this a coincidence, but is used to explain that this was the second perfect and completed sign and miracle made by who? Well, that's the Messiah. In other words, this is a comparison of his co-deity in that everything that God the Father did was perfect and complete. So was everything that Yeshua did like the Father. The Father does everything in completion and perfection. So does our Messiah, showing co-deity here. Now, what's the result in your outline? Let's go to the result of the miracle here. What's the result here? The final result of Yeshua creating this miracle is, starting with point 1 here, it showed his co-deity to create by what? Well, to create by his word the same as God. Okay, point number 2. It showed the official that by having true faith and trust in Yeshua's word, it would heal and it would lead to the healing and miracle itself. Result number 3 here. The result of the miracle not only increased the official's trust in Yeshua, but it led to his whole household placing faith and trust in Yeshua as the promised Messiah of Israel. Point and final point here, number 4, is that the final result of this miracle shows that it is God's spoken word alone which brings and restores life, as well as what? Well as gives life. Now, in our next miracle in John's Gospel, we'll begin to see more details on the co-deity of Yeshua as our Messiah. And that is going to complete Course 4, Week 4 for today. Please join us again for Course 5, Week 5 in the next video session. Thank you for watching The Life of the Messiah through the Gospel of John. We'll see you again.
You've been watching Life of the Messiah through the Gospel of John. Be sure and watch Course 5 Week 5 with Rabbi Pastor LaRue. Shalom.